The morning sun rose over New Eden like it had done every day for the past 20 years. The golden light spread across endless fields of wheat that moved like ocean waves in the gentle breeze. The planet had two suns, but the smaller one only came out in the afternoon, giving the farmers perfect light for their work. Yunwoo Park walked through his wheat field, checking each plant with careful eyes. His hands were rough from years of working the soil, but his heart was happy. Every grain of wheat meant food for his family and the other colonists who had made this distant world their home. The wheat here grew better than anywhere else in the galaxy. The soil was rich and black, and the climate was perfect for farming. His wife Bo-Ra was teaching their three children about the old farming ways near the Big Red Barn. Their oldest son Taemin was 12 and already knew how to operate the harvesting machines. Their daughter Sujin was 10 and could identify every type of plant disease just by looking at the leaves. Their youngest boy Woo-Jin was only 8, but he could drive the small tractors better than most adults. The Park family had come to New Eden when Hyun-woo was just 25 years old. They left Earth because they wanted a simple life away from the crowded cities and the constant noise of modern civilization. Here they could grow their own food, raise their children in peace, and live according to their own values there. Neighbor Ji-ho Kim ran the local workshop, where he fixed all the farming equipment for the colony. Ji-ho was a genius with machines. He could repair anything from the smallest seed planter to the largest combine harvester. His workshop was always busy because farming machines worked hard and broke down often. The colonists trusted Ji-ho completely because he never charged too much money and always did perfect work. The colony had exactly 2,000 people living in small houses scattered across the farming areas. Most families had been there for more than 15 years. Some children had been born on New Eden and had never seen Earth or any other planet. This was their home, and they loved it more than anything else in the universe. Every morning, the colonists would wake up early to tend their crops. The work was hard but satisfying. They grew wheat, corn, soybeans, and vegetables that fed not just their own families but also other human colonies in nearby star systems. New Eden was known throughout the region as the breadbasket world that could feed anyone who needed food. The colonists had a simple government led by Min-ho Lee, who had been elected by everyone in the colony. Min-ho was a fair man who listened to all problems and helped solve disputes between neighbors. He had been a soldier on Earth many years ago, but now he preferred growing tomatoes in his garden to fighting wars. Old woman Yoon-suk Choi was the colony historian who remembered the early days when the first settlers arrived. She had been one of the original colonists and had helped clear the land and build the first houses. Yoon-suk was 70 years old now, but she still worked in her vegetable garden every day. The young people loved listening to her stories about the old times. The colonists had built a beautiful community center in the middle of their main town where they held meetings and celebrations. The building was made from local wood and stone and had a big kitchen where the women cooked meals for special occasions. Children played in the park next to the community center while their parents worked in the fields. New Eden had no cities or factories or military bases. The colonists had chosen this simple life on purpose. They wanted to live close to nature and raise their families in peace. They had advanced technology for farming, but they kept their lives simple and focused on what really mattered to them. The planet was far from Earth and the other major human worlds. It took 3 months to travel there by the fastest spaceships. Most people in the galaxy had never heard of New Eden, and that was exactly how the colonists liked it. They did not want attention from governments or corporations or military forces, but the colonists were not naive about the dangers of living on the frontier. They knew that space was full of alien races who might want to take their planet. Some aliens were friendly and some were not. The colonists had heard stories about other human colonies that had been attacked or forced to leave their homes. The farming equipment on New Eden looked normal, but it was built by human engineers who understood that frontier colonies needed to be able to defend themselves. The tractors were stronger than they needed to be for farming. The irrigation systems had extra power generators. The storage buildings were built like fortresses, even though they looked like simple barns. Every colonist knew how to use all the farming equipment. Even the children learned how to operate the machines as soon as they were old enough. This was not just for farming purposes, but the colonists did not talk about the other reasons. The knowledge was passed down quietly from parents to children. The colonists traded with other human worlds and sometimes with friendly alien species. They sold their food and bought manufactured goods, medicine, and raw materials. The trade ships that visited New Eden always commented on how peaceful and productive the colony was. The visitors never suspected that the farming equipment could be used for anything other than growing food. Captain Rex of the Calvary Third Fleet was studying reports about New Eden in his command center aboard the flagship warrior Pride. The Calvary were a proud warrior race with blue skin and 4 arms. They controlled this region of space and demanded tribute from all the planets in their territory. The Calvary High Command had decided that New Eden was too valuable to leave in human hands. The planet could grow enough food to feed entire star systems, and the Empire needed that food production for their expanding population. The reports showed that New Eden had no military defenses and only 2,000 peaceful farmers. Rex looked at the tactical display showing New Eden as a small green dot in space. The planet appeared completely defenseless, with no orbital platforms, no military ships, and no weapon installations. The intelligence reports described a simple farming community that spent all their time growing crops and raising families. The captain had conquered many worlds for the Calvary Empire. Most species surrendered quickly when they saw his battle fleet of 12 heavy cruisers and 40 support ships. Some tried to fight, but they were usually defeated within hours. The Calvary were experienced warriors who had been fighting for centuries. Rex expected the humans to surrender immediately when they saw his fleet. Humans were known for being unpredictable, but these were just farmers who had chosen to live peacefully. The captain planned to give them one day to evacuate the planet before he claimed it for the Empire. The Calvary had left human colonies alone for 50 years because they had learned that humans could be dangerous when threatened, but the reports about New Eden showed no signs of military preparation. The colonists appeared to be genuinely peaceful people who cared only about farming. Rex ordered his fleet to prepare for departure. To New Eden, the journey would take 2 days, and he expected to complete the mission within a week. The captain believed this would be one of the easiest conquests of his career. He had no idea that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The Calvary fleet entered hyperspace heading toward New Eden while the colonists continued their daily routines. Completely unaware that their peaceful lives were about to be disrupted, the morning sun continued to shine on the wheat fields, and the farmers continued to tend their crops, not knowing that war was coming to their quiet world. The Calvary fleet dropped out of hyperspace above New Eden with a sound like thunder that shook the ground. The massive warships blocked out the sun as they moved into position over the farming communities. Children stopped playing and looked up at the sky where metal giants floated like dark clouds. Captain Rex stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the peaceful planet below. He could see the neat rows of crops, the small houses, and the farming equipment moving through the fields. Everything looked exactly like the intelligence reports had described. A simple farming colony with no defenses. Rex activated the communication system and sent a message to the planet's surface. His voice was strong and commanding, like a warrior should sound when conquering new territory. The message was simple and clear. The humans had 1 day to pack their belongings and leave New Eden forever. Yin Wu was checking his irrigation system when the message came through the colony communication network. He stopped working and listened to the alien voice demanding that his family abandon their home. The voice spoke in the common galactic language that all spacefaring species used for trade and diplomacy. The farming equipment throughout New Eden received the message at the same time. Every tractor, every harvester, every piece of machinery was connected to the colony communication system. This was normal for farming operations, but it also meant that every colonist heard the Calvary demand simultaneously. Anwu walked quickly to his house where Biora was teaching their children about plant biology. The family gathered around their kitchen table while the alien voice repeated its demands through their home communication unit. The children looked scared, but their parents remained calm. All across New Eden, families were having similar conversations in their homes. The colonists had always known this day might come. They had prepared for it, even though they hoped it would never happen. The preparation had been subtle and hidden, but it was Relman Ho Lee activated the colony emergency system and called for all colonists to gather at the community center within 2 hours. The emergency system used the same communication network that connected all the farming equipment. This meant the message reached every person on the planet instantly. The colonists began walking toward the community center. From all directions, families came from distant farms carrying their children and their most important possessions. The gathering looked like a harvest festival except for the giant alien warships floating overhead. 2,000 people filled the community center and the park outside. The building was not big enough for everyone, so most people stood in the open air under the alien ships. The colonists were quiet and serious, but they were not panicking. Min Ho stood on the steps of the community center so everyone could see him. He had been a soldier before becoming a farmer, and his military training showed in the way he stood and spoke. The colonists trusted his judgment because he had always been fair and wise. The elected leader explained what the Calvari had demanded. The aliens wanted New Eden for themselves, and they were giving the colonists one day to leave forever. If the humans refused to go, the aliens would force them to leave using their powerful weapons. The colonists began discussing their options in small groups. Families talked quietly among themselves, while neighbors shared their thoughts and fears. Some people wanted to negotiate with the aliens. Others wanted to contact the Earth government for help. Old woman Yoon Suk stood up slowly and walked to the center of the crowd. Her voice was not loud, but everyone listened when she spoke. She had lived through the Mars colony wars 30 years ago, and she understood what happened when peaceful people were forced to fight. Suk reminded the colonists that their ancestors had come to New Eden to live free. They had worked for 20 years to build their homes and their farms. Their children had been born here and knew no other world. This was not just a place to live, it was their home. The old woman told the crowd that humans had always been good at protecting their families and their homes. She said that the farming equipment they used every day was more powerful than the aliens. Realized the colonists had the tools they needed to defend themselves. The discussion continued for hours as the alien ships waited overhead. The colonists voted on whether to surrender their homes or fight for them. The vote was not close. Almost everyone chose to stay and defend New Eden, even though they knew the odds were against them. As the sun began to set, the colonists made their final decision. They would not surrender their homes to the aliens. They would use whatever means necessary to protect their families and their way of life. The decision was made with heavy hearts but firm. Reserveji Ho Kim opened his workshop and began pulling equipment from storage areas that most people had never seen. Tools that looked like farming equipment but were designed for very different purposes. The workshop became busy as other colonists arrived to help. The colonists worked through the night in teams that had been organized years before. Each family had specific jobs and responsibilities that they had practiced during their regular farming work. The organization looked like preparation for a big harvest, but it was actually preparation for war. Children helped their parents by carrying tools and equipment. The work was familiar to them because they had been doing similar tasks their whole lives. The only difference was that tonight the equipment would be used to defend their homes instead of growing food. The cavalry fleet watched from space as the humans gathered in their town. Captain Rex expected to see panic and confusion as the colonists prepared to evacuate. Instead, he saw organized activity that looked suspiciously like military preparation. Rex consulted with his intelligence officers, who assured him that the humans had no military training and no weapons. The activity on the planet's surface was probably just the colonists packing their belongings and preparing to leave New Eden forever. The captain decided to wait and see what the humans would do in the morning. If they tried to resist, his fleet would demonstrate its power by destroying some empty buildings. This usually convinced stubborn colonists to surrender without further fighting. As dawn approached, the colonists finished their preparations. The farming equipment had been modified and repositioned throughout the colony. Every piece of machinery was connected to the central control system that usually managed irrigation and harvesting operations. The colonists gathered their families and took positions near their homes and farms. They carried equipment that looked like normal farming tools, but had been adjusted for different purposes. The children stayed close to their parents, ready to help with whatever came. Next, Captain Rex prepared to send another message to the planet's surface demanding immediate surrender. He expected the humans to raise a white flag and begin loading their belongings onto transport ships. Instead, the colonists seemed to be taking defensive positions. The Calvari captain realized that these farmers might actually try to fight his battle fleet. The idea seemed ridiculous, but human behavior was often unpredictable. Rex decided to fire a warning shot to demonstrate the power of his weapons and convince the humans to surrender. The morning sun rose over New Eden as 2,000 colonists prepared to defend their homes against impossible odds. They were farmers, not soldiers, but they were humans who loved their families more than they feared death. The galaxy was about to learn why peaceful human settlers carried weapons that terrified fleets. The first rays of sunlight touched the wheat fields of New Eden as Captain Rex moved his fleet into attack position. The Calvari warships formed a perfect battle formation above the farming colony, ready to demonstrate their overwhelming power. The captain planned to fire warning shots at empty buildings to show the humans what would happen if they continued to resist. Down on the planet's surface, the colonists stood ready near their homes and farms. Each family group carried equipment that looked completely normal for a farming community. The irrigation controllers, seed planters, and fertilizer distributors appeared to be ordinary tools that any farmer would. Yuxia Yunwu held his irrigation control device in his weathered hands. The device looked like a simple computer tablet used to manage water flow to different fields. Biora stood beside him holding what appeared to be a mechanical seed planter. The device had tubes and chambers that normally held seeds for planting crops there. Children carried backpacks that looked like fertilizer distribution systems. The packs had tanks and hoses that normally spread nutrients across planted fields. Everything the family carried looked perfectly normal for people who grew food for. A living Ninho stood in the town center holding a device that looked like a soil analysis computer. The machine normally tested dirt to determine what nutrients plants needed. The elected leader looked calm and determined as he prepared to give the signal that would change everything. All across New Eden, similar scenes were taking place. Families stood together holding farming equipment that had been in their storage sheds for years. The equipment looked old and well used, like tools that had been maintained and repaired many times. The truth about human frontier colonies was about to be revealed. Every piece of farming equipment had been designed by human engineers who understood that peaceful colonists needed ways to defend themselves. The irrigation systems could do much more than water crops. The seed planters were built to launch much more than seeds. The fertilizer distributors could create electromagnetic fields that would disable electronic systems. The soil analysis computers could control defensive systems that had been hidden throughout the colony. This technology existed in every human colony in frontier space. The defensive systems were disguised as farming equipment because humans had learned that other species always underestimated farmers. The camouflage was perfect because the equipment really did work for farming. Unsuk activated her soil testing device and suddenly hidden sensors throughout New Eden came online. The Calvari fleet appeared on tactical displays that showed every ship position, speed, and weapon status. The colonists had been quietly scanning their alien visitors since the moment they arrived. The old woman smiled as she remembered her training from the Mars Colony Wars. Human colonies looked peaceful because humans preferred peace, but they were prepared for war because humans understood that sometimes peace had to be defended with violence. Seiji Ho worked at his control station in the workshop. Equipment that normally manufactured farming tools was now configured to coordinate the colony defensive systems. The workshop had always been the nerve center of New Eden, but today it would control a battle. The colonists had spent the night converting their farming infrastructure into a weapon system. The conversion was possible because human engineers had designed the equipment for dual purposes. The colonists were not warriors, but they had been trained to defend their homes. Captain Rex prepared to fire his warning shot at an empty storage building on the edge of town. The plasma beam would completely destroy the structure and demonstrate Calvari power to the humans. Watching from below, the captain expected immediate surrender after this show of force. The Calvari weapons officer targeted the storage building and charged the plasma cannon. The shot would be precisely controlled to avoid damaging Valuable farmland. The captain wanted to minimize destruction of the planet he was about to claim for the Empire. Rex gave the order to fire, and the plasma beam lanced down from his flagship. The brilliant energy struck the storage building and vaporized it instantly. The explosion lit up the morning sky and sent a clear message to the humans below. The captain waited for the white flag of surrender that never came. Instead, the humans responded with something no Calvari had ever seen before. Han Wu pressed a control on his irrigation device, and the entire planet became a weapon. Underground systems that normally carried water to crop fields suddenly carried something much more dangerous. Electromagnetic accelerators built into the irrigation network launched metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The railgun system used the colony power grid to generate massive amounts of energy. The first volley caught the Calvari fleet completely by surprise. Metal slugs moving at near light speed punched through warship armor like it was paper. 3 heavy cruisers exploded instantly as their hulls were penetrated by the simple iron projectiles. Captain Rex stared at his tactical display in shock and disbelief. His science officer was shouting readings that made no sense. The humans were firing railguns from what appeared to be a water irrigation system. The impossible was happening right before his Icebora activated her seed planter and launched a different type of projectile. These devices attached to ship hulls and began drilling through the armor once they penetrated the outer shell. They released nanomachines that disabled electronic systems throughout the target vessel. To more Calvari cruisers lost power and began drifting helplessly in space. Their crews worked frantically to restore their systems, but the nanomachines were designed to be nearly impossible to remove. The ships became floating metal coffins. The human children participated in the defense by operating their fertilizer distribution systems. The backpack devices created electromagnetic pulse fields that disrupted Calvari communications. The fleet coordination broke down as ships lost contact with each other. Captain Rex realized he was not fighting a farming colony. He was fighting a fortress that had been disguised as a peaceful community. Every piece of equipment, every building, every system on the planet was part of an integrated defense network. The Calvari tried to retreat to a safer distance, but discovered another unpleasant surprise. The planet gravity field was being artificially enhanced by the same technology that helped heavy farming equipment work efficiently. The increased gravity made it difficult for ships to escape. The colonists worked with the smooth efficiency of a harvest crew. Everyone knew their job and performed it without panic or confusion. Parents and children operated different parts of the defense system with the same coordination they used during planting. Season Rex watched in horror as his elite battle fleet was systematically destroyed by farmers using irrigation equipment. The Calvari were proud warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had never faced an enemy like this. The humans fought like they farmed, with patience, determination, and complete commitment to protecting what they had built. The colony defensive systems were operated by people who loved their homes more than they feared death. Half the Calvari fleet was destroyed or disabled within the first hour of battle. The remaining ships found themselves trapped in orbit, unable to retreat and unable to mount an effective attack. The proud warriors of the Empire were being defeated by farmers. Captain Rex realized that he had made a terrible mistake in underestimating the humans. These colonists had appeared peaceful because they preferred peace, but when their families were threatened, they became the most dangerous enemy the Calvari had ever faced. The battle was far from over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The humans had revealed their true nature, and the Calvari were learning why peaceful human settlers carried weapons that terrified fleets across the galaxy. The battle entered its second hour as Captain Rex watched his proud fleet being torn apart by farmers using garden tools. The Calvari had fought wars across the galaxy for centuries, but they had never encountered an enemy that turned everyday life into weapons of mass destruction. The colonists of New Eden worked at their defensive positions with the same calm efficiency they showed during harvest season. Families operated their equipment in perfect coordination, while children helped by monitoring displays and carrying supplies. The battle looked like a community farming project, except for the exploding spaceships. Overhead, Ian Wu adjusted his irrigation controller to target the Calvari flagship, the underground railgun system responded, instantly launching a barrage of metal slugs at the massive warship. The projectiles struck the hull with devastating impact, but the flagship armor was too thick to penetrate. Completely, Captain Rex felt his ship shake under the impact. Of human weapons, he ordered his crew to return fire, but the Calvari plasma cannons could not target the underground launch sites. The humans had buried their weapons beneath innocent-looking farmland. Bora coordinated with her neighbors to launch a coordinated attack using their seed planters. The devices fired smart projectiles that could change direction in flight. The nanomachine payloads were designed to disable specific ship systems rather than destroy the vessels completely. 3 more Calvari ships lost power as the nanomachines infiltrated their computer networks. The alien crews watched helplessly as their weapon systems shut down and their engines stopped working. The ships became helpless targets floating in space. The human children operated their electromagnetic pulse generators with the skill of experienced technicians. They had been trained to use the equipment since they were old enough to walk. The training had been disguised as education about farming technology. Jin Park worked at her control station, coordinating the pulse field generators across multiple farming areas. The 10-year-old girl had better tactical awareness than most Calvari military officers. Her training had been hidden in games and farming lessons. The electromagnetic pulses disrupted more than just ship communications. They interfered with Calvari targeting systems and navigation computers. The alien fleet found itself flying blind in a battle zone filled with deadly projectiles. Captain Rex ordered his remaining ships to focus all firepower on the human town. If he could not defeat the colonists in space, he would destroy their families on the ground. The decision was born of desperation, and it would prove to be his final mistake. The Calvari plasma beams lanced down toward the community center where human families were coordinating their defense. The captain expected to see buildings vaporize and humans running in panic. Instead, he witnessed something that defied all military logic. The plasma beams struck an invisible barrier that surrounded the entire town. The energy was absorbed and redirected harmlessly into the ground. The humans had built a defensive shield using the same technology that protected their crops from harmful radiation. Minho had activated the agricultural protection system that kept dangerous solar radiation away from growing plants. The same energy fields that helped crops grow healthy also provided protection from alien weapons. The shield was powered by the colony fusion reactor. The Calvari bombardment continued for 30 minutes without causing any damage to the human settlement. The plasma beams were absorbed by the shield and converted into electrical energy that powered the colony defensive systems. Rex realized that attacking the human families had only made the colonists fight harder. The railgun fire increased in intensity as more irrigation systems came online. The Calvari fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that grew stronger when threatened. Dunsu coordinated the final phase of the battle from her command post in the community center. The old woman had fought in the Mars colony wars, and she understood how to defeat a superior enemy. The key was to make the enemy defeat itself. The human defensive systems had been recording detailed information about every Calvari ship since the battle began. The farming computers analyzed the data and identified weak points in the alien vessel. Designas Jiho received the analysis data in his workshop and programmed the information into the colony manufacturing systems. The equipment that normally built farming tools began producing specialized ammunition designed to exploit Calvari weaknesses. The new projectiles were launched within minutes of being manufactured. Each one was designed to target specific vulnerabilities in different ship types. The precision manufacturing that made excellent farming equipment also made devastating weapons. Captain Rex watched in horror as his ships began exploding from the inside. The human projectiles were penetrating his hulls at exactly the right points to cause maximum damage. The farmers were fighting with scientific precision. The Calvari fleet tried to retreat but found themselves still trapped by the enhanced gravity field. The same technology that helped farming equipment work efficiently in heavy gravity also prevented enemy ships from escaping. The colonists pressed their advantage by launching their most sophisticated attack, yet the agricultural drone systems that normally monitored crop health transformed into autonomous weapons platforms. Thousands of small flying machines emerged from hidden launch sites throughout the farming areas. The drones moved in coordinated swarms that confused the cavalry targeting systems. Each drone carried sensors and weapons designed for different purposes. The drone swarms surrounded the remaining cavalry ships and began attacking from all directions. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that behaved like a living organism rather than a military force zone. Drones attacked ship engines while others targeted weapon systems. The swarm coordination was controlled by the same computer systems that managed crop rotation and soil nutrition. The farming artificial intelligence had become a war machine captain. Rex made his final desperate decision. He ordered all remaining ships to ram the human town. Even if the colonists had shields, the combined mass of his fleet would overwhelm any defense. The cavalry would die with honor, though. Human defensive systems detected the cavalry suicide attack and responded with overwhelming force. Every railgun, every pulse generator, every drone swarm focused on the incoming ships. The combined firepower of an entire farming planet concentrated on a single target. Cavalry ships were vaporized before they could reach the planet's surface. The final attack had failed completely. The proud warriors of the Empire had been defeated by farmers using tools disguised as irrigation equipment. The space around New Eden was filled with debris from the destroyed cavalry fleet. Only a few small ships remained intact, and they were drifting powerlessly. With their crews unconscious from electromagnetic pulse exposure, the colonists shut down their weapon systems and began checking for damage to their farming equipment. The battle had lasted 4 hours, but the conversion back to peaceful farming would take only minutes. Captain Rex floated in the wreckage of his flagship wearing an emergency life support suit. His career was over and his fleet was destroyed. The humans had won a victory that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. The farmers of New Eden had demonstrated that peaceful colonists could defend themselves against any threat. The galaxy would never again underestimate human farming communities. The silence that followed the destruction of the cavalry fleet was broken only by the gentle sound of wind moving through the wheat fields of New Eden. The colonists stood at their defensive positions, looking up at the debris floating in space, where a proud battle fleet had existed just hours before Captain Rex drifted in his life support suit among the wreckage of his flagship. The Warrior Pride had been the most powerful ship in the Cavalry Third Fleet. Now it was scattered pieces of metal floating around a farming planet. The captain could not understand how this had happened. The human colonists began the process of converting their weapons back to farming equipment. The same systems that had destroyed warships would soon be watering crops and planting seeds. The transformation was quick and efficient because the equipment had been designed for dual purpose. Wu checked his irrigation controller to make sure the underground rail gun system was safely shut down. The magnetic accelerators were powering down and the launch tubes were being cleared of any remaining projectiles. The system would be ready for crop watering within an hour. Bora and her neighbors gathered their seed planters and began the conversion process. The nanomachine manufacturing systems were shut down and the devices were recalibrated for normal agricultural use. The same precision that had disabled alien ships would now plant next season crops. The children helped their parents by carrying equipment back to storage areas. The electromagnetic pulse generators were converted back to fertilizer distribution systems. The young colonists performed their tasks with the same calm efficiency they had shown during the battle. Minho walked through the town checking on all the families. Every colonist was safe and unharmed despite the fierce battle that had raged overhead. The community center had served as both command post and shelter during the fighting. The elected leader activated the colony communication system and sent a message to all the farming areas. The battle was over and New Eden was safe. The colonists could return to their normal lives and their crops. The defensive systems would remain ready but hidden. Old woman Yoon-suk sat in her chair looking out at the wheat fields that stretched to the horizon. She had lived through 2 wars and she knew that victory came with a price. The galaxy would never look at human farming colonies the same way again. The survivors of the cavalry fleet were rescued by automated systems that launched from the planet's surface. The humans had no desire to let their enemies die in space. The rescue pods would take the aliens to the nearest cavalry outpost. Captain Rex was brought aboard a rescue ship along with the few hundred survivors from his fleet of thousands. The humans provided medical care and supplies for the journey. Home, the colonists showed mercy to enemies who had come to destroy their families. The captain spent the journey trying to understand what had happened to his fleet. He wrote detailed reports about the battle, but he knew that many people would not believe his account. The idea of farmers defeating a battle fleet seemed impossible. Rescue ships carried more than just survivors. They carried the news of what had happened at New Eden. The story would spread throughout the galaxy and change how every species viewed human colonies. 3 days later, the first news reports reached the HFY Empire. The High Command initially dismissed the reports as impossible propaganda. No farming colony could defeat a battle fleet using irrigation equipment. The reports had to be exaggerated or false, but as more details emerged, the truth became undeniable. The humans had hidden military technology inside their farming equipment. The colony defensive systems were more sophisticated than most military installations. The HFY Empire immediately issued new orders to all their fleets. Human colonies were no longer to be considered easy targets. Every farming planet should be treated as a potential military threat. The underestimation of human farmers had cost them an entire battle fleet. News of the battle spread to other alien governments throughout the region. The peaceful farmers of New Eden had accomplished something that trained military forces had never achieved. They had completely destroyed a HFY fleet without losing a single colonist. The human government on Earth received the reports with mixed feelings. They were proud that their colonists had defended themselves successfully, but they were also concerned about the military implications of the victory. Earth officials sent investigators to New Eden to study the colony defensive systems. The investigators found that every piece of farming equipment had been designed by human engineers who understood frontier realities. The dual-purpose technology existed in every human colony in frontier space. The defensive capabilities were hidden, but they were real. The farming communities that appeared peaceful were actually heavily armed fortresses. Other species began to reassess their relationships with human colonies. The farmers who grew food for galactic trade were also capable of defending themselves against any threat. The implications were staggering. Trade agreements were renegotiated as alien governments realized they had been dealing with communities that possessed advanced military technology. The human farming colonies suddenly became much more valuable as allies. The colony of New Eden returned to its normal routine of growing crops and raising families. The defensive systems were converted back to agricultural use, and the weapons were hidden once again. The farmers preferred peace, but they were ready for war. Children played in the fields where railguns had fired just days before. Families tended their crops using equipment that had destroyed an entire battle fleet. The transformation was complete, and the colony appeared peaceful once again, but the galaxy had learned an important lesson about human nature. The colonists who chose to live peacefully were often the most dangerous enemies when their families were threatened. The farmers carried weapons that terrified fleets. Captain Rex arrived at the HFY homeworld to face a military tribunal. His career was over and his reputation was destroyed. The captain, who had lost an entire fleet to farmers, would be remembered as a cautionary tale. The tribunal listened to Rex describe the battle in detail. The captain explained how farming equipment had been converted to weapons and how the colony defensive systems had outmatched HFY technology. The military judges found it difficult to believe that irrigation systems could destroy warships, but the evidence was undeniable. The wreckage of the Third Fleet was still floating around New Eden. The HFY Empire officially declared that human colonies were off limits to military action. The cost of conquering a single farming planet was too high to justify. The farmers had won not just a battle, but a war throughout the galaxy. The story of New Eden became legend. The peaceful human settlers who had defeated a battle fleet using farming tools. The victory inspired other colonies and terrified potential enemies. The farmers of New Eden had changed the balance of power in their region of space. They had demonstrated that humans could defend themselves against any threat. The galaxy would never again underestimate the power of human determination. 6 months had passed since the battle that changed everything on New Eden. The wheat fields stretched golden and healthy under the twin suns, as if nothing had ever disturbed the peaceful farming world. The colonists had rebuilt their lives and Their equipment was back to growing food instead of fighting War Shin Wu. Walked through his fields with his children, teaching them about crop rotation and soil management. The irrigation system that had fired railguns at alien warships now carried fresh water to thirsty plants. The conversion was so complete that visitors would never suspect the true nature of the equipment. His wife Bio Ra worked in her garden with the seed planter that had launched nanomachine weapons against the Calvari fleet. The device was back to its original purpose of putting seeds in the ground at precisely the right depth and spacing. Their children played in the fields where electromagnetic pulse generators had disabled alien ships. The fertilizer distribution systems were spreading nutrients to help crops grow instead of creating defensive fields. The farming equipment looked completely normal and peaceful. The community center had been rebuilt and expanded to accommodate the growing population. New families were arriving every month, drawn by the safety and prosperity of New Eden. The colony was becoming famous throughout human space. Minho stood in the center of town, welcoming a group of new colonists who had just arrived from Earth. The families carried their belongings and their hopes for a better life on the frontier. They had heard about the farming community that had defeated a battle fleet. The new arrivals were farmers and craftsmen who wanted to live simply and raise their children in peace. They were not soldiers or warriors, but they carried the same determination that had made New Eden famous, the human spirit of protecting family and homeland. Woman Yoon Suk told the newcomers about the colony history and the battle that had saved their community. She explained how the farming equipment worked for both agriculture and defense. The knowledge was passed down quietly from generation to generation. The new colonists learned about the dual-purpose technology that made frontier farming possible. They understood that peaceful life required the ability to defend that peace. The lessons were taught through normal farming activities. Jiho expanded his workshop to train more colonists in equipment maintenance and operation. The skills needed to repair farming machinery were the same skills needed to maintain defensive systems. The training was practical and necessary. Ships arrived regularly at New Eden, carrying trade goods and news from other worlds. The colony had become a major food supplier for the entire region. The farming output had increased significantly since the battle. The visiting trade captains always commented on how peaceful and productive the colony appeared. They saw farmers working in fields, children playing in schools, and families living quiet lives. The defensive capabilities remained hidden. Captain Sarah Kim arrived from Earth aboard a new cargo ship. She had heard the stories about New Eden and wanted to see the famous farming colony for herself. The captain was impressed by the organization and efficiency of the operation. Sarah met with Minho to discuss expanding trade agreements. The colony was producing more food than ever before, and Earth needed reliable suppliers. The farming communities on the frontier were becoming essential to human civilization. The captain learned about the colony defensive systems during her visit. She saw how normal farming equipment could be quickly converted to weapons when necessary. The technology was impressive, but the people were even more remarkable. The colonists had not become soldiers or warriors despite their victory. They remained farmers who loved their land and their families. The battle had been fought to protect their way of life, not to gain glory or conquest. News continued to spread throughout the galaxy about the farming colony that had defeated a battle fleet. The story inspired other human colonies to review their own defensive preparations. The frontier communities became more confident. The Calvari Empire had officially declared human colonies off limits to military action. Other alien species followed this example, understanding that the cost of attacking human farmers was too high to justify. A delegation of alien ambassadors visited New Eden to study the colony and meet with the human leaders. The visitors were impressed by the peaceful nature of the community and the sophistication of the farming operation. The ambassadors learned that human colonies were not militaristic societies preparing for war. They were farming communities that preferred peace, but were prepared to defend themselves when threatened. The distinction was important. Trade agreements were negotiated with several alien species who wanted to buy food from New Eden. The colony became a center of peaceful commerce and cultural exchange. The farming world had become a diplomatic success. The children of New Eden grew up knowing they lived in a safe and prosperous community. Their parents had fought to protect their future, and the victory had created lasting peace. The young colonists learned both farming and defensive skill. Schools were built to educate the growing population of children. The curriculum included agriculture, science, technology, and history. The students learned about their heritage and their responsibilities. The colony expanded its farming operations to meet growing demand. New areas were cleared and planted with crops. The irrigation systems were extended to water larger areas. The defensive capabilities grew along with the agricultural output. Wu stood in his fields watching his children play among the wheat stalks. The same equipment that had saved their lives now provided food for thousands of people throughout the galaxy. The purpose had returned to its original intention. The farming tools remained ready for conversion to weapons if needed, but the colonists hoped that day would never come. The victory at New Eden had created a period of peace that benefited everyone. Other human colonies began adopting similar defensive systems. The technology spread throughout frontier space, hidden within normal farming equipment. The peaceful communities became quietly prepared for any threat. The galaxy learned to respect human farming colonies not through fear but through understanding. The farmers who grew food for interstellar trade were also capable of defending themselves against any enemy. New Eden became a symbol of human determination and ingenuity. The colonists had proven that peaceful people could protect their families and their way of life. The victory had changed the balance of power in their region of space. The harvest season arrived, and the colonists worked together to bring in their crops. The same coordination that had defeated the Calvari fleet now gathered food to feed the galaxy. The community spirit remained strong. Captain Rex visited New Eden as part of a diplomatic mission. The former Calvari commander had become an advocate for peaceful relations with human colonies. He understood the futility of attacking communities that preferred peace but were prepared for war. The galaxy had become a safer place because everyone understood that human farmers carried tools that could destroy battle fleets. The threat of violence had prevented actual violence. The peace was maintained through strength. New Eden continued to grow and prosper under the protection of its hidden defensive systems. The colonists lived their quiet lives, raising families and growing food. The farming world had found the perfect balance between peace and preparedness. The story of New Eden spread throughout human space, inspiring new colonies and strengthening existing ones. The farmers who had defeated a battle fleet became heroes not through conquest, but through the defense of their homes and families. The peaceful harvest continued year after year on New Eden. The farming colony had achieved its goal of living free and raising the next generation in safety. The weapons that terrified fleets remained hidden in the fields where children played and crops grew tall.